America, liberty and justice for all. And a moment of silence, please. Thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
That's Mr.
Do I
Parrish.
have a second?
Are there any additions or deletions?
I don't recall there being any addendums. Mr. Curry, could you confirm that, please?
No, there are no, this is not a regular meeting, so the same section of the code doesn't apply. However, all of these items have been on for a number of days.
Thank you very much.
I'll second Mr. Parrish's motion.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. I have a motion and a second. Unlike other meetings where we vote in unison, since this is an electronic meeting, we will conduct all votes by a roll call vote. If you could signify your vote when your name is called, please. Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
And I also. Mr. Curry, at this time, would it be appropriate for you to discuss for a moment how meetings differ when we conduct them on the electronic platform versus in public?
I'd be happy.
Versus in person?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In general, the board will proceed first and most importantly is identified in the prepared agenda materials. The meeting is being carried out pursuant to the emergency ordinance that was adopted by the board on April 6th. That emergency ordinance provides for the continuity of government, and because of COVID-19 and it not being appropriate for multiple or several people to occupy the same space, the board is conducting the meeting electronically and citizens are welcome to join electronically. Because no attendees or participants can't see who is talking, it is appropriate for each vote to be a roll call vote and for members to announce themselves as they speak. While most of us know each other's voices, that may not be the case for all citizens that are participating.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. That brings us up to the next item on the agenda, item C. Board of Supervisors provides 2021 proposed budget and tax rates introduction. Mr. Curry, it looks like you have some items to tee up for this, if you would, please.
Yes, I'm sharing a copy of the presentation that is attached to the agenda, and I will walk through this rather quickly, allowing questions at the chair's discretion from board members. The material is posted to board docs, so it is available as a resource in the future if people want to go back and look at it. This is the Board of Supervisors' proposed budget and public hearing for the budget and the tax rates tonight. And that includes the county budget, inclusive of the school budget. And I'm going to mute all lines while I do this, so as to avoid background noise. So the agenda for this budget is as shown. I'll talk through the main budget points, the main highlights for this budget, and then I'll walk through each section of the budget. And board members, if you need my attention, please raise your proverbial hand. As the board's aware, I presented my proposed budget back in March, and since then the budget has been modified to account for several items, and so the pathway totally is for the department and agency heads to send their requests to me. I prepare a balanced budget. The board reviews that budget through work sessions. We hold this formal public hearing on tax rates and the budget. Then following this meeting, the board can contemplate the public comments that were provided during public hearing and change the budget, and then finally adopt the FY21 budget. After today, your next meeting will be on April 27th, next Monday, for a work session to work through any changes the board would like to make, followed by a regular meeting on May 4th, followed by a budget meeting on May 11th, and another budget meeting on May 13th. The school budget must be adopted by May 15th unless something changes at the state level. The board can cancel the 11th and 13th meetings if so desired, if they're not deemed necessary. I've walked through most of this during my presentation, but we'll go through it again. The major budget inputs this year included the classification and compensation study, 4.8% increase in our health insurance, a reduction in our VRS rate, which is our pension program, the refuse and operational expenditure reduction for the Page County option, essentially level request from the RCPS originally, and then a significant reduction subsequently when the revised General Assembly budget came through. Social services and CSA budget reforecast, an additional full-time employee in the Sheriff's Office and dispatch, expansion of your capital pay-as-you-go funds for current critical capital updates, the first half of reassessment costs for our 6-year cycle, and then a continued provision of funds for one-time dollars for capital needs such as your buildings. Lastly, there is a fire service fund increase to support the transition to paid EMS. I kept this similar slide as I had in my original budget presentation, but note here, with COVID-19, the $250,000 set aside in the board contingency for the classification and compensation study has been eliminated. The budget continues to include a health insurance restructuring, including a fixed $1,100 raise for each employee to offset some of those health insurance costs. The reoccurring expenses continue to be aligned with reoccurring revenue. Funds are tracked. The school budget is as proposed by the superintendent and now the school board includes approximately 4.5% salary increase, 3% plus a step, but requires essentially a level to, or actually reduced local transfer. This proposed budget is structured to fund only 3.5%. It does fund 100% of operational budget for the 7 fire and rescue companies. However, it does not rely on any increase to the fire levy tax to provide an additional $300,000 contingency within the fire service fund as a starting point for paid EMS. It handles that by providing a transfer from the general fund to the fire service fund, and a large part of this is coming from reductions coming out of the classification and compensation study. So deferring that and shifting those dollars to fire service. Significant changes to the board proposed budget as opposed to the county administrator proposed budget includes a reduction of anticipated revenue from meals and lodging tax, the 50% reduction in quarter 1, a 25% reduction in quarter 2, and then a reduction of the sales tax as well, 50% in quarter 1 and 25% in quarter 2. It defers $118,000 of pay-as-you-go capital expenditures, and as revenue begins to be apparent as we move through FY2021, this and perhaps the classification and compensation study could be put back on the table if revenue proves to be stronger than anticipated. It defers the implementation of the classification and compensation plan, as I noted before. The $250,000 included $170,000 for the study implementation, as well as $80,000 for the health insurance offset. It now provides $80,000 for the 2% bonus that is contemplated by the General Assembly approved budget. So it's a net reduction of $90,000. As I noted last slide, it reduces the transfer to the schools by approximately $75,000, so that it's a 2% plus step rather than 3% plus step. And then, as I noted, the change from potential increased tax rate for the fire levy tax to a level tax and a transfer from the general fund of $228,742, when combined with dollars already expected to be received by the fire service fund, leads to $300,000 available for contingent expenditures, including paid EMS. All of that happened before the significant impacts from COVID, from the governor's recent amendments were announced. The governor has released amendments that unallot many sources of increased funding. The reconvened session will start in 2 days, and the General Assembly will consider those amendments made by the governor. At any rate, the governor has unallotted the state share of the 2% bonus for state responsible local employees, and that was the justification for the Board of Supervisors' proposed budget to include a 2% bonus. It unallotted additional funding for commissioner revenue salaries, additional funding for registrar salaries, additional funding for libraries, the share of the 2% raise for the schools, and share of other school funding, which still need to review in detail with the superintendent. As I note on the slide, we don't completely know what unallot means. I understand generally that for now it's parked on the side until revenue is fully understood. This proposed balanced budget does not incorporate the governor's budget amendments, or doesn't incorporate changes reflective of the governor's amendment. And that is something the board should consider doing prior to adoption and as the reconvened session works its way through. This is a picture of the overall balanced budget, each fund balanced among itself and the entire budget balanced. This information, as I said, is available in board docs, and citizens can review it at their leisure. And graphically, you can see that this, including transfers, the general fund is approximately 49% of the entire budget, although $8 million of that is being transferred over to the school fund. This is the budget without transfers, and you can see the overall budget over the years between original and amended as we work through 19, 20, and then the FY21 request is compared to the proposed budget. This slide is a good quick view of the proportion of each of these different agencies that are funded locally versus non-locally. And you can see the bottom part of the bar is local revenue. And for the library bar, I need to note that the local fund includes their use of their library trust dollars for the renovation and expansion project that is just underway with design. So you can see on one end of the spectrum, social services has about a 30-70 split with local, state, federal, whereas the library is the less than 15% outside revenue from the state. Digging into the entire budget, the general fund is by far the largest fund, and as I note here, this is similar to the slide that I provided in my proposed budget. However, you can see other local revenue is reduced now, and that is reflective of the reduction of the forecast for sales tax and meals and lodging tax. And as I noted before, it does not include any impacts from the unallotted state funds. That's yet to do. And graphically, you can see your general property, basically real estate and personal property tax accounts for over 70% of all revenue coming into the county. some localities who rely heavily on meals and lodging and B-poll taxes are significantly impacted by a downturn such as this, like a Williamsburg or something like that, and you would see a much greater piece of the pie for the other local, which for us is 7.4%. The general fund expenditure side, as you can see at the top line, that this budget does continue to include $80,000 for the 2% bonus, and the state funding portion of that is in the low $20,000 range. Of course, that's only for some of our employees in the 2% bonus, and only on the state compensation board salary, not the amount we pay, which each employee has a local supplement. And not all employees receive funding from the state. It does reflect a significant reduction in anticipated expenditures due to the refuse contract. And as I noted before, the rec authority's request, and rather than providing $47,000 one time, this budget structures in a recurring expense of $12,000 per year. This slide shows you each of the budget functions, which is groupings of departments, and how they compare between FY20 and FY21. You'll see the general government administration, the bottom bar, it includes county administration and board of supervisors and a few others. And it's larger in 21, mostly because of the parking of the $80,000 bonus in FY21 within the BOS contingency fund, rather than placing it into individual departments. And we can talk a little bit more about that as we move on. As I noted, significant changes with the pay matters. The current budget as presented includes the health insurance restructure, which includes approximately $80,000 of investment and transfer from health insurance premium cost share to salary. It eliminates the Baker-Tilly classification compensation study funding and pushes that off, hopefully partially sometime in fiscal 21 if revenue is available. If not, it'll have to push further. And again, as I noted, this budget does not recognize the fact that the governor has proposed to unallot state funding for the bonus. And if that happens, I would suggest that the board, if the funding is not available, the board should remove the bonus from this budget as well. Health insurance, I know there's been a lot of conversation regarding the health insurance, and I know staff and board have a lot of questions. Overall, there was a 4.8% premium increase, and we've seen that the last couple of years, about that amount. Our pool of employees is so small, our local experience rate doesn't really play into our increases. We're rated on the overall pool, and that's good, because if we had one or two employees that had very high claims, which if in the unfortunate case of cancer or something like that, it could drive the plan to gyrate extensively, and it would be burdensome for us. What I've recommended is to change the county's share, portion that the county funds, from it being based on the Key Advantage 250 plan to the Key Advantage 1000 plan, but then make up for a significant portion of the reduction by paying salary rather than the premium cost. And I know that's very confusing, and I've included a couple memos in the agenda under agenda items specifically about this later, so I won't go into it in any more detail here. As noted previously, the position allocation list for the general fund is important, and it helps us keep track of which departments have which positions, and ensures that the board is involved in the decision-making process as we grow the county staff over the years. And this table indicates the changes in red, where the sheriff picking up an additional employee, and social services actually mid this year shifting a part-time employee to essentially full-time employee. They have 12.8, but all positions are benefits earning. The sheriff budget is one of your largest budgets, and unfortunately the classification and compensation plan implementation was largely geared towards this group to make sure that our officers are properly paid. They are some of the most mobile employees because of the parity in jobs from one locality to another. Once you're a certified law enforcement officer, you can work in most any locality, and so we need to make sure we're properly compensating those employees and all employees. As I did last year, I'm recommending that we take a vacancy credit for this department, recognizing that with the number of employees they have, they do tend to have vacancies through the year, and so salaries do not need to be full employment salaries in the budget. Lastly, this budget still includes 2 vehicles for the sheriff. And I'm going to breeze through this, but you can see the red bars are actual spending on the left and projected actual spending in 20, and then the proposed budget. There's been a bit of an increase. This year they're behind on spending, and I'd have to dig in detail to see why that is. This slide shows with the blue bars the actual employment, and the red line is their full employment. So in the back years, their full employment was 20. We added a school resource officer, so we'd have one at both schools, up to 21. And then in FY21, adding a communications officer to go up to 22 employees. Seeing the divergence of the blue bars from the red bar line indicates that we can reasonably safely take a vacancy credit in this department. No need to budget for it if it's very unlikely for full employment to happen. And the library fund, I've just noted here that you can see PowerPoint doesn't like the word unallotted, but the increase of funding from about 48,000 to 60,000 in this latest budget. The increase up to 60 was unallotted, and as I'm showing, there's $100,000 from there, actually $110,000 from their investment fund being used in this budget, 100,000 of which is being set aside for design of the expansion and renovation services. This budget does not include any pay increases which the library board has requested and were included within the classification and compensation study. Of course, that's no longer in the budget. The school fund, the budget's based on ADM of 780. You can see that the school superintendent and the school board are requesting 3% plus a step. The General Assembly included 4% over 2 years, at least in a 2+2 basis. This budget includes 1% less than what it was requested, which is approximately $75,000. There are many changes that are likely to come through for this budget because of the unallotment of funds, and much more to be reviewed and considered in that area. As I noted earlier, the Fire Service Fund, when I presented in March, included a proposed 2-cent increase to the real estate tax rate for the Fire Levy Fund. Rather than do that, this fund now includes $228,472 in a transfer from the general fund. That results in less overall dollars in the Fire Service Fund, but provides for and that's very small to see, overall $300,000 contingency budget for the Fire Service Fund, and includes the apparatus replacement funds, which were debated to some extent last year. Social Services Fund is similar to last year and continues to refine the revenue expectations. It does right now include expected increases from the 2% bonus, which may have to be walked back due to the unallotment. CSA is level with the proposed budget of $1.3 million is level with what FY20 was budgeted. However, I'll say that FY20 will need an increase this year over the next month or so through a supplemental appropriation due to the expenditures there. And the CSA coordinator has moved to a full-time position to help manage our way to lower expenditures in this very large and expensive fund. The debt service fund, you can see I've laid out the debt service payments going forward, and by FY 2026 you'll be down to no debt service unless the board takes out more debt for a capital project. The capital fund, as noted, includes the pay-as-you-go capital as well as one-time revenue capital. The PAYGO budget is proposed at $242,000. That includes $92,000 of funding for the first year of the reassessment. When I spoke to the board, when I proposed my budget, the Next Generation 911 project was expected to originally budgeted to be complete in FY 2020. Delays from the state have pushed that back, and now we expect nearly all of that, probably all of that, to be spent in FY 2021. That's a $260,000 budget for the 911 call handling system equipment, of which $210,000 is coming from a grant. The $50,000 delta is from your fund balance. And then, as I noted last year, the public safety radio improvements to add 800 megahertz transmit and receive sites, that's pushed off a year from what we talked about last year. And the idea is let's implement the system now, which should go live in June or July. And once we see the coverage from that, then the board and community can decide whether it makes sense to make a considerable investment to add transmit sites here in the county to supplement what we were receiving from the towers that are located in Fauquier and Culpeper. And this table for review at a later time has been updated to reflect the reduction of the PAYGO, which is all from the schools. When that was done, the schools anticipated receiving a significant infusion of funds from the state for capital, and I'm not sure where that stands relative to the governor's amended budget. Final thoughts. There's still much work to do to align this budget with what it comes out of the state, considering the unallotted funds. And I am recommending that all raises, except for the health insurance offset, be either removed from the budget or moved to the board contingency budget line and only spent if and when revenue, local and state, is shown to be available. And that would include the $80,000 bonus and the 2% plus step for the schools. And I'm not sure the total value of that when you remove the state funding. And then I can bring it back up for any questions board members have as I get your mics back unmuted. I think all board members are now unmuted.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. So I guess the best way to handle this then is let's go around the virtual table, so to speak, and any feedback each board member may have question-wise in regards to the fund. Mr. Frazier, did you have any feedback on the presentation this evening?
No, I can withhold any comments I have until after a couple members of the public may speak if they wish.
And we will open 2 public hearings tonight, one for the budget and one for the tax rate. But I thought the presentation spoke to both, so do that in a combined manner ahead of time.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Donahue, did you have any questions we could answer at this time?
I think I'm going to follow Mr. Frazier's lead and listen to what the citizens have to say, and then I may have a few at the end.
Thank you. Mr. Whitson, did you have anything we could address?
I just had a few comments for all of us and, to think about as we move toward adopting the budget. Obviously, with this crisis going on, we have to concern ourselves with a continued flow of local tax revenue. And Mr. Curry, I think a couple of weeks ago, had adopted a somewhat conservative projection of reduced meals and lodging and sales tax reduction of 50% in Q1 of the fiscal year, and a continued reduction of 25% net revenue in the second quarter. And as this public health crisis continues, I just want us all to think about whether we need to be even more conservative in those projections through Q2 and possibly even going into Q3. And as Mr. Curry pointed out, it is a small share of our overall tax-related revenue stream, but still a significant one. And rough numbers, I'm concerned that we easily, in the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, could, if projections are not conservative enough, could end up with over $200,000 shortfall, revenue shortfall from combined sales and meals and lodging tax revenue. And I'm also concerned in light of the fact that, at least from where I sit, I will not and cannot, in this current crisis when everyone is suffering, support a property tax increase in any form. So I just want us all to be mindful of the fact that we might have to tighten our belts even further on more conservative projections through Q2 and possibly in Q3 on local tax revenue, and think about how that affects the bottom line as we move toward budget adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson.
And the one last point, I was also concerned what collection of property tax and real estate property tax and personal property tax might look like as this crisis winds down. And I did talk with our treasurer, Ms. Nick, and we looked at the post-2008 financial crisis period to see what collections look like on real estate and personal property tax, and also the delinquency rate. And somewhat reassuringly, it seems that we held the line on real property and personal property tax revenue. So having talked with her, I'm a little less concerned that we might take a revenue hit there. So really my focus continues to be on how do we make sure that we're not misprojecting a reduction in local tax revenue into Q3. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parrish, did you have anything we should address before we move on?
My only question, when I was looking at the revenue for the rescue squads and the fire departments, I did not see the revenue for the insurance that we collect when they make the calls. That's not that's part of the revenue.
Yes, sir. This is Gary. The revenue from the EMS cost recovery shows up in a separate fund for EMS cost recovery, and it's basically shown as a revenue of $125,000 and an expense of $125,000 coming in and going out.
Okay. Thank you. I just couldn't find it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. This is Christine Smith, and I just wanted to say I just wish that there was a way, and I know it's sort of like trying to hit a moving target at this point, but as the situation clarifies and we move forward to adopt this budget, if there is a way to show a little more equal treatment to the two sides of the house in terms of pay increases. We struggled with this last year, and we weren't able to give the same increase to the county employees as to the school employees. And we had decided at that time to do this classification study because we do feel it is important to have a fair basis for pay. And if there's any way that we can improve that situation as we move forward, I think it is critical that we do so. I know it is challenging and there are a lot of pieces in play, but I just want that always to be at the forefront because we did, make some concessions to move things forward last year, If there's any way that we can cover that territory this year, I think we should. So that takes us through that part of the agenda, unless someone has anything to add. Very good. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, D1, the public hearing on the the fiscal year 2021 budget public hearing. Mr. Curry, if you could cue that up for us, please.
Yes, ma'am. As you can see on the screen, hopefully, the public hearing was advertised in the newspaper as required by the Code of Virginia and identified 3 ways through which citizens could provide comment. Those included emailing the admin at rappahannockcountyva.gov account, calling the county administration office and speaking to us during business hours or leaving a message after hours, and that comment may be available at this time through electronic means. Not wanting to promise that that is capable, never knowing the capability of electronics. I received 1 email, and I would like to read that for the board now and into the record and for the public. And then once I'm done, well actually, Supervisor Smith, you should open the public hearing. I will read the email, and then you can open the floor to others and ask them to raise their hand through the Zoom platform.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Curry. So with that, I would declare this public hearing open. As Mr. Curry mentioned, he does have a letter to read in for the record. And at that point, if you have something that you would like to say, on the Zoom platform in the upper right-hand corner, there are 3 dots that you can pull down from the top of the screen, or that will appear in your upper right-hand corner, where it says More. And one of your options under the More menu up there is raise your hand. And so if you'd like to be recognized for comment in this public hearing, all you have to do is raise your hand, and we will identify you, and your mic will go live, and you'll be able to participate in the hearing in that manner. And with that, I declare the public hearing open.
Okay, I will read this one letter received to our email address, and it's from a Jill Jefferson, who writes, "Good afternoon, Administrator Curry, Supervisors, and Madam Chair of Supervisors. This letter is for your consideration during the current budget season and hopefully can be included in the public comment of your next board meeting. I've copied planning commissioners, except Mary Catherine, as I do not have her email. So the commissioners could also consider addressing this comment during a commissioner meeting. First, thank you for all your work ensuring all citizens have county services during this COVID-19 crisis. I appreciate all of your efforts to meet virtually and go to the extra mile to keep services operating during these uncertain times. That said, I wish to go on record to request the county's support to have equity for access to the internet. For those of us in areas where there is no cellular service, this is a particularly difficult issue. Landlines in these beautiful remote hollows are copper wires, and the lines are often prone to going out in bad weather. Do any of the board members have no cell service and only rely on landlines? If so, please think about how often this happens. It is quite frequent during high winds. This lack of cellular service poses a direct threat in the event of emergency, especially during inclement weather. As a senior citizen, my partner, also a senior, and I worry about the ability to call for emergency services if needed during a storm, when landline outages are common. Additionally, in our area on Swindler Hollow Road, in the Old Hollow, we only have limited broadband through satellite. Due to topographic constraints and low population, there are no other internet providers that service our community, only 2 satellite providers. Our limited internet is insufficient for daily remote telework options. Before this, I'm going to mute one line here. Before this current crisis, internet was already insufficient. Now the increased internet users during remote teleworking has brought our internet capacity to a staggering all-time slow capacity. We're run out of internet by the 3rd week of each month, even though we have purchased the maximum capacity. This poses a significant economic hardship on me. I cannot participate on online conference calls as I am unable to drive and cannot go to the